I'm live. Hi, everybody.
I'm having trouble.
No one's there.
Are you sure you're live on Facebook?
I think so.
I don't think you are.
Oh, not seeing it?
No.
Okay. You sure?
It's not popping up if you are.
Anybody?
Let me see.
Yeah, I'm gonna start over. Well, there's Lisa's there.
Oh, there it is.
Hey, Lisa. You always come. You're the best cousin. Little Billions. Hey, what's up, Billy? How are you, brother? Look, I'm checking out the Insta feed. They're piling Annie, Cheyenne, Faith. We're rocking tonight. We got 7 people already. It's like 6:01. Forewarning, Sophia's in a bad mood.
That really helped a bit.
Oh, Deandra's here. And Dorothy. I'm seeing faces. 8 people. Wow. I feel famous. Oh no. Hey everybody. I'm rocking 2 cameras. Insta, Facebook. Insta, Facebook. Facebook, Insta.
Oh my god!
Wow, I was in a crappy mood until like 2 seconds ago.
You're thriving off my mood.
so Sophia's horrible mood is actually filling me with lots of joy. As is this Aperol Spritz. People. So what we like to do at the beginning here while we let our crowd gather is just say hello. You're free to offer us what you're pre-gaming with. I'm pre-gaming with an Aperol Spritz. My previous pre-games have been Campari Spritz, Negroni, Negroni from last week, which didn't work. I substituted vodka for gin, and the Negroni, it was not good.
It's kind of a bad angle.
Is the angle's bad for Insta or Facebook?
It's like Facebook. It's just like this.
Okay, so what should I do?
Like it's good when you're standing up, but when you're sitting down, it's not.
Should I just stand up for the whole thing anyway?
Can you do that?
Yeah. What? Who's saying? Can we get some feedback from the audience?
Wait, let me see the Facebook. Yeah, even your student was like, what happened to the aesthetic angle? Like a better angle. Other one was better.
From like last week?
Yeah.
Oh, we can't change that now. Oh, we have to change the angle because I'm gonna do some cooking later here,
Yeah.
real quickly, and I need to not have to pick up the
It
cameras.
says to lower the camera. Isaac.
Isaac.
Mark.
Hey, what's up, Isaac? Like lower it like this?
Yeah. Let's see
Better?
what Instagram is saying. Amy says shut up and sing.
Who's this?
Amy. Someone named Paul said, can you do a push-up?
Ken? I do push-ups for dollars.
Okay, I really don't like this one.
All right, we're gonna have to limit the angles.
No, you're not.
All right. Soap to the rescue.
It's just, you're too far. This is too high up.
We're gonna have to live with this.
Whatever.
All right. Good. Anybody want to tell us what they're consuming at the moment? Oh.
There's a glare.
Hi, Leah. There's a glare?
Yeah.
Who said that?
Isaac.
Shut up. Hi, Katarina. How are you?
He also calls you too short.
Too short.
Oh, apparently you should come closer. You can't hear that well.
Oh, okay. How's this? Hey, Kaylee. Buono. Is this better? Look, here's my sink. Is it better? Sorry, folks.
Paul said get taller. Told you you're not.
Is that Paul Gasparo or Paul Turlick?
Despair.
Because Paul Gaspar's a smart ass and Paul Torley's a film guy, so I'm going to trust the film guy.
Despair is the one that's
shut up,
good.
Cruz.
Your student said perfect. I can't remember her name. I really forget. It's the one that's like Valis.
Deandra.
Deandra.
She's practically your stepsister.
What?
We're in a doctor.
Ah! That's not weird.
Not weird at all. I mean, what happens? All right.
Everyone says yes better.
Okay, good.
I bet they're just saying that to get the show on the road.
I bet they're just saying that to get the show on the road, too.
Stop touching it. It was better.
Good?
Yeah.
Oh, you should see the face. Come say hi, so. Then be gone. Okay, everybody, this is Sophia. Welcome to Casacato. Thank you so much for coming. This is going to be the last of our Aperitivo Reading Hour series. It's been wonderful. I think this is our 6th of such event. The first 4 were with Cucina Tipica, an Italian adventure, and last week, and tonight will be with Outerborough Blues, a Brooklyn mystery. Maybe if we're still locked up in a few weeks, so we'll come back for a one-night stand on the domino effect, but I'm thinking this is going to be it. And I'm really excited. Soph has been a big help. I've just been paying her in prosciutto and bread, and $20 later apparently is required. She's in a crappy mood tonight. She's got the Corona Blues, which is actually fairly consistent with one of tonight's themes, which is music and blues music in particular. So Soph can beat it.
Okay.
All right.
That's my cue. Goodbye.
Keep going. And what we're doing here each week is getting together first and foremost. I hope all of you had a good week. Mine sucked. It was just a really bad week. And every week is bad these days, but some, there's good days, bad days. This week was particularly hard, and I know that that's probably the same for a lot of you guys too. And things like this, for those of us who organize them and give our time to them, are intended to help, provide a little bit of an uplift. So I hope that's the effect. It certainly helps me. If no one else is benefiting from this, at least I am, and I'm happy to see your faces and communicate with you in the week ahead as we arrange this. It's just nice to be connected to people other than 18-year-olds who are making faces at you all day long.
I was just called the mastermind, so let's not.
Who said you were the mastermind?
Isaac Mark.
Okay. He's right, Isaac. So the idea here, and I'll get started in a minute, is to read passages from my novels that deal with food. Food being sort of a collective presence in all of our lives, and certainly one that provides pleasure and comfort. And pleasure and comfort are most things that are obviously in great need these days. Food informs the narrative in all my novels, much of my journalism as well, particularly in Cucina Tipica, an Italian adventure, but also in Outerborough Blues, a Brooklyn mystery, where the protagonist is a chef. A quick overview of the story is that it's about a drifter named Caesar Stiles who runs away from home at 15, returns to the East Coast at 25, with the intention of ending his family's Sicilian curse. He settles in Brooklyn, in the neighborhood that is not named but is assumed to be Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and tries to find his way into the neighborhood's milieu, and doesn't, is having a hard time. A mystery ensues where he's trying to find a missing art student. He's hoping that effort will lend himself into ingratiation into the neighborhood, but it leads actually into the underbelly of the neighborhood and some pretty serious problems for him. The book is full of food scenes, as he's a chef, as I mentioned. It also has lots of music, and music, another one of the themes that I go back to again and again and again. As a writer, I find more inspiration, from music than I do from literature. I do read books too, but I also grew up listening to music. I wasn't a reader growing up. I wasn't even a good student, to be honest with you. I didn't say that to my students. I didn't like school. I had for whatever reason. But when I got to college, I discovered a love of literature and a desire to tell stories. As I started telling those stories, the things that kept coming to me were the music I grew up listening to. One of the types of music I love particularly is the blues. So the blues informs this story immensely. Obviously, it's in the title, Outerborough Blues. And so tonight I'm going to read food scenes and scenes that involve music. So I think music is just as important. I'm always raving about food being important for comfort and community and all that kind of stuff. But food, obviously music is a huge thing in our lives, and we get together and hear people play music live, or we listen to recordings of it. You know, it just has a massive impact on us as people. So I'm gonna read these passages. I feel that these are among the most lyrical passages the book has to offer. Now, if you remember from last week, the book has 7 chapters. Each one is a day of the week, and the week preceding Easter, each of those chapters also has flashbacks to Caesar's time on the road and flashbacks to his adolescence growing up. So I'm going to read you one dream sequence. The rest are going to deal directly with events in his life, whether they're in Brooklyn or in the past, where food or booze or music was a primary factor. When we last left Caesar, he was just having interaction with the femme fatale, the Colette character in his apartment. The first scene here, I lost my page. Is a flashback scene to his travels on the road as a runaway. This one takes place in Iowa, and it's very much inspired by the novella Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. In Iowa, I embraced violence and depravity. I worked in a shotgun bar full of losers, a ramshackle joint surrounded by cornfields on the outskirts of Ames. All day long, I served beer and cans and liquor straight up to down on their luck men and their on-again, off-again girlfriends. They all had something wrong with them. Addiction or physical disabilities or personality disorders, sometimes all 3. The owner, a soulless old man into rackets, dealt pills and took bets, and many of the hapless who came to the bar to drink were in the hole to him. If they failed to fork over their drinking money, I was one who had to take it from them. And this was never simple or easy, because even the tamest scumbag will come up with some courage when their drinking funds are at stake. As a result, I had to find a way to do my job with efficiency. So I went to the knife. As most people, drunk, disabled, or otherwise, are frozen by the sight of a blade and the thought of being cut and the image of all that blood. I was thus able to keep the regular crowd honest for the most part, though on occasion, I still have to take a sickle-shaped nick out of someone's cheek. One dry evening, I even ventilated the game jersey of a degenerate linebacker from the State University. It was a rotten job, but I had nowhere else to go. I lived in the cab of an abandoned tractor trailer down the road from the bar. I slept in the storage space behind the seats and kept my things stacked on the dash. During the day, I'd run through the cornfields. With the shafts and loose husks tearing at my shoulders, I'd storm the open rows until my lungs began to seize. Then I'd take a drink of cool water from a well before pumping rounds of push-ups off the rich soil. The smell of minerals filled my nose as my chest and back tightened. In the late afternoon, following my workout, I'd sit on the tin roof of the bar, smoke cigarettes, and watch the rows of corn swim in the wind. Crows flapped through the steady air to rest on black wires and consider me. In the distance, tractor dust billowed from above a river that wended through a field sown with heather. Enormous cloud formations, like white buffalo, roamed the great plains of the sky, floating giant pools of shadow on the vast flat lands. And there on the tin roof, the Iowa sunset in my eyes, I'd think of my abandoned mother and my dead brother and my missing father and wonder if there ever would be a time when I wouldn't feel so alone. The wife of the bar owner was a strawberry blonde who wore cowboy boots and rodeo skirts. She was easily 20 years older than me, though her age was only evident in the skin that gathered around her elbows and the lines that webbed her eyes when she smiled. She was sweet and moody like a child, and even made faces like a little girl. Most nights, she'd saunter in around closing time, her colored skirt swinging through the muted light of the bleary room. She would sit on the stool at the end of the bar, smoke my cigarettes, and sing sad songs. While I tossed out the late-night lingerers, she'd take a fifth of whiskey and back, not returning until the bottle was empty. With her husband passed out in his chair, his feet on his desk, and an antique pistol across his lap, she'd take me by the hand over to the pool table where she would peel off my clothes and wash my drawn skin with a warm bar towel. Then, with her childlike voice and sweet blinking eyes, she'd ask me to do things I'd never imagined. No matter what we did, how deranged or complicated or possibly illegal, she always kept her boots on. Toward morning, in the cresting orange dawn, on the hood of her car in the parking lot, she'd braid my hair and ask me how the previous night's sales of booze and pills and bets had gone, telling me that part of the take was mine due to the work I did for her husband beyond fixing drinks. Her math was a mystery, but her reasoning seemed right. So as the sun rose on the honest earth and its honest people, I'd hand my mistress the money and pills I'd stolen from her husband. She said she'd keep it for a rainy day. One stormy night, amidst the hailstorms of August, the bar owner stumbled from the back in a stupor, the pellet rattle on the tin roof having roused him from his bourbon dreams. He came into the bar room, rubbing his eyes, opened them, and saw me standing there next to his wife, who was on the pool table. He held up his hand, then walked back into the office. He returned a moment later, firing his old revolver with a shaky hand. His wife and I hustled off the pool table as bullets ricocheted around the room, blasting the lamp above the pool table and throwing green glass everywhere. We scooped up our clothes and ran out the door, both of us naked except for her cowboy boots that clacked across the wooden floor. The last thing I heard was cursing as he shot a last round through the mirror behind the bar. We tore through the frozen rain into her Volkswagen. With the keys already in the ignition, she started the car and spun gravel through the length of the parking lot until we fishtailed onto the rural road. We were still naked, hail and glass falling from our hair as the car split the fields, headlights on the horizon, the frozen rain that exploded off the hood like popped corn. We drove dead west in total silence. Eventually, I passed out. When I woke, it was bright daylight, and we were 60 miles from Denver. She checked us into a motel on a ridge above a truck stop. The air was warm and bright, the mountains in the distance, topped by snow. Her trunk was full of cash and pills, and we spent the next few weeks dealing amphetamines out of our room. When we weren't dealing, we sat by the hotel pool, drinking champagne from plastic glasses, or had sex without stunts or gadgets. She told me we'd be leaving for Northern California soon, where we'd live on grapes and love in the hills and hollows of wine country. That doesn't work out, spoiler alert. So what happens is that, I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but Caesar ends up having to bribe a truck driver with a bunch of pills to take him on wherever the truck driver was going, just get out of Denver. And they end up going down to Texas for a scene where we get introduced to the blues. Oh, I gotta turn on my boiling water. Move away from the water. Okay. In Austin, I built houses and haunted bars. The town felt like an oasis with the oppression that is Texas. I'm gonna move this down just a little bit. Okay. In Austin, I built houses and haunted bars. The town felt like an oasis within the oppression that is Texas. The girls from the university were wild and friendly, and there was music everywhere. It was there that I met a musician named Macy Turner. He wore an alligator vest, and his braided hair hung like a gray mane down his back. A feather dangled from his right ear. A big, left-handed man, 1 part Indian and 3 parts black. He told me he came from the 2 most persecuted peoples in history after the Jews. I asked him about the Irish, and he said they were 4th. Macy knew hundreds of songs, all blues, none of them his own. He said that that didn't matter because nothing was original, only taken from other stuff. He said that songs were stories which made him a storyteller, and that stories were clues to understanding life. He told his tales on a circuit around the American South, from Texas and Arkansas through Mississippi and Louisiana. He traveled alone, and he traveled by train. Said he'd been at it for 100 years. He played an antique Martin guitar slung across his waist, his big boot tapping out time while his deep voice, which needed no amplification, belted out the tunes. He was known by everyone in Austin, so when the word spread that Macy was in town, he'd draw a big crowd wherever he played. Being two loners in a fraternal town, we became fast friends. Some nights after the bars closed and the music went silent, the two of us would go back to the empty houses where I worked days and slept on lonely nights. We would sit in the frame of the houses without walls or roofs, and he'd tell me stories under the Texas sky rung with stars. He told me the devil lived on a hilltop in Mississippi, and that New Orleans was a city kept afloat by the souls of slave owners. He said Muddy Waters was in heaven and Howlin' Wolf was in hell, and that they'd wrestle on nights when there was a 3/4 moon. He said his father was a sharecropper who married a half Seminole from Tallahassee, and that his mother had sewn herself into a cotton kite and flown away when he was 4 years old. He told me he was the youngest of 11 and left home at age 8 because he'd come to believe that the devil preyed on unloved children. He ended up in a Biloxi whorehouse where the prostitutes raised him and the Johns taught him their songs. At the age of 13, after being raised right by the love of countless women and many rambling men, he left the whorehouse to wander the country, telling stories and saving souls. I told Macy my story, and he cried in the blue light of a West Texas dawn. He said I still might be saved. We set off to traveling together. He played his guitar and I listened from the dusty corners of warbling trains and juke joints buried deep in the woods. He sang of floods and drought, of curses and cures, of little girls and grown women, of cheating men and decent men. There were songs about regret and songs about redemption, about pleasure and pain, walking and rolling and moving on. Love in vain and love gone wrong. His songs taught me that men were restless souls, chased by the past after something that could not be found. He said the key to salvation was in our hearts and not in our feet, and that something could be learned by singing the blues. God's mercy, he told me, found every man in a moment of grace, and the earlier you found that grace, the better man you'd become. After a turn through the circuit, on our way back to Texas, we stopped at a roadhouse in Louisiana where I met the owner's daughter, a bayou child named Carmen with corkscrew hair and green apple eyes. She asked me to dance a Cajun jitterbug. Macy left me there that night without saying goodbye. He must have thought I'd be saved by her grace, but he was wrong. I think that's my favorite passage from the book. This next one, so that passage right there, by the way, not besides being my favorite, is also really important because if the sequel to Outerborough Blues is coming out this year, right? It's called Black Irish Blues. If there's another one subsequent to that, which I believe there will be, it will take place back in Louisiana, where Caesar goes to find Carmen, who goes missing, and he teams up again with Macy, so they'll have another Macy Turner sort of buddy movie. It's not like a buddy movie that we see on TV, but it will be Caesar and Macy reunited. I'm really excited about that. Of course, I'll have to go do some research down around New Orleans, and we're at Louisiana, so if you want to come along, just let me know. This next scene is also important because it takes place in the bar in the hometown where Caesar grew up. Right? He's living in Brooklyn now, right? But in the sequel, Black Irish Blues, he goes home to buy this bar and seek redemption through its redemption. Right? And as this begins, he's staying at his mother's house just temporarily before he goes back to Brooklyn. The sky was the color of salmon when I left the house to walk into town. The traffic along the road had increased with the activity of the evening rush, and I felt the eyes of my hometown glance at me as cars slowed for a moment and people looked at me before speeding away from what to them was an unfamiliar face. A desire to be seen, to be recognized, surged inside me. I was tired of being a stranger. There was time to kill before the next train back to the city, so I decided to eat dinner at the inn to find out for myself what all the complaining was about. I had never actually been inside the place, though I had peeked through the small slotted windows many times as a kid, hoping to spot my father when I saw his motorcycle parked by the curb outside. The view through the dirty windows had always been hazy, and I'd never gotten a true sense of the room. Entering the inn for the first time, I noticed how little light there was, even in the twilight of daytime. The room was split in half, with a bar, booths, and small tables on one side, and an open dining room on the other. The walls were covered in wood paneling, reminding me of an old train depot. I sat at the bar. The bartender was a man in his 50s, with soft white hair pushed back around the sides of his head. He wore a white shirt with black pants, a red apron tied around his paunch. He had sparkling blue eyes and an easy smile. "Can I get you?" he asked, leaning into the bar with both hands, a clean towel over his shoulder, his voice still holding the hard scrabble of the Bronx. Except for the two old men at the back table watching the TV bolted to the wall above the bar, I was the only person in the joint. I ordered a pint of Guinness and a steak sandwich, medium rare. The bartender wrote the order on a ticket, stuck it on a nail at the waiter station, and rang a desk bell. A busboy immediately came through the swinging kitchen door, grabbed the ticket, and returned to the kitchen. The bartender spun a pint glass around his palm and angled it under the Guinness tap. The effervescence roiled the bottom of the glass as a deep brown rose on top of itself with a thin beige head. It was a tough drink to pour, but he handled it like an old pro. Behind him, the bar was in perfect order, everything polished to a high shine. There was no neon beer signs obstructing the mirror, no advertisements at all, as a matter of fact. All the bottles were arranged neatly, the stacked glasses in easy reach. "Done that before?" I asked the bartender. "Once or twice," he said with a wink. He put the glass in front of me, then walked away. I took a sip. The stout tasted of burnt chocolate as I considered the room. It had potential, though more seats and better light were needed. Ditching the train motif was probably a good idea too, as was fixing the jukebox in the nook at the front of the bar. However, the actual bar itself was in good shape and the tender couldn't have been better. After a few minutes he came back, placed the steak sandwich in front of me, and refilled my glass without my having to ask. "It's on me," he said. I didn't like that. While it might be good for tips, putting a customer's second drink on the house is bad for business. Free rounds had to be earned. But when I tasted the sandwich, I understood the bartender's generosity. He needed to make a living, and the food was a disaster. First off, the steak was the wrong cut, sirloin instead of flank or hanger, and had been overcooked. While the long roll was a decent choice, it had been over-toasted and buried with burnt garlic. A simple scratching with a raw clove is all you need to make garlic bread, as opposed to filling someone's mouth with instant halitosis. The sandwich also needed red onions and mayonnaise, not pickles and Russian dressing. And the onion rings had been fried in old oil, vegetable at that, instead of peanut oil. I took a few more reluctant bites before finally pushing away my plate. The bartender walked over slowly. "Would you like to take the rest of this home?" he asked in an exaggerated formality. "It's all right," I said. "I don't have a dog." He laughed out loud and picked up the plate and carried it down to the waiter station at the end of the bar. From down there, he crossed his arms and stared at me as I finished my stout. Not particularly good manners, I thought, for a bartender with particularly good manners. I set my eyes on him. "Help you with something?" I said. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry, but I've been thinking about something since you walked in here. I gotta ask. You're Tim Styles' kid, ain't you?" I felt the floor move beneath me. My face flushed with heat. I couldn't help but look away. The bartender laughed. "I knew it," he said. "I never forget a face, and yours has had me going since you walked in here. You look just like him, just darker and, bigger." "You don't say," I said, the world sort of spinning around me. He walked over. "That's right," he said. "He used to sit right there where you're sitting now, right in the middle of the room, so everyone could hear him tell his stories." His reverie then fell silent as I imagined my father recalling what happened. Imagined him recalling what happened when my father's stories went on for too long. I wondered how many times this bartender had to throw my father out of this place. "You're not meeting him here today, are you?" the bartender asked. "And how in the fuck would I meet him here?" I hadn't meant to say it like that, but it was out there now and I couldn't take it back. "Hey," he said, holding his hands up. "He does drop in on occasion, "What?" I asked, as if I'd just been hit between the eyes with a pool ball. I hadn't heard a word from my father in 13 years. I figured he was dead or out west, as far as the road would take him. Yet now I was hearing that he still drank at his old bar in his old town. "That's right," the bartender said. "A few years back, he dropped in one day out of the blue. Said he was living in a cabin he had built up by the Delaware Water Gap. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked the same, though. Must be good genes or something. He still comes by once in a while for a few pops. He was just in here, I don't know, about a month ago." The bartender continued talking, but I couldn't hear what he was saying, as my ears were full of static. I stepped carefully off the bar. I stepped carefully off the bar stool as if I'd been on it for hours. Left a $20 tip on a 15 tab and walked out the door. Stumbling onto the sidewalk, I lit a cigarette. Faint darkness had been drawn like a shade. I walked across the street in a cloud of confusion, my head swimming, with thoughts about my father. What did he know about his ravaged family? Was he here for the house? Why hadn't he come looking for me? Maybe he had. I kept coming back to that last thought. Maybe my father was looking for me. I got one more scene. So that scene again is really important to the story because right, it lends itself to the sequel. Caesar goes back home, buys his bar, and is hoping to reconcile with his father, and some other shit happens that makes the mystery of the sequel. Okay, let's continue in a minute after I get my pasta in. Okay, I'm making a pasta carbonara tonight, which I will gladly show you how to make. It's 4 ingredients, 5 if you count pasta water. It's a really simple dish to make, but it's a classic of Italian cuisine, especially like cucina romana cuisine. When you make pasta, you're making the Dead Sea in the water. Well, short of the Dead Sea, you shouldn't be able to float in it, but you're adding a lot of salt to it. That much salt. Your pasta goes in. You're cooking your pasta every time al dente, right? We know what that means, to the bite. So a couple minutes short of being done. In many cases, what I do is I take my pasta and I put it right into the sauce next to the pan and finish it there. I don't drain it, and then take it into the drainer and add sauce. You just take it right from the pot that it's been cooking in, right? And finish it, in the sauce. So even short of al dente, you do that. 80% of the cooking time is what you should use. The book says 10 minutes. The box says 10 minutes. Cook it 8 minutes. Right? Take it out. Put it in the sauce. This one I'm gonna do 9 minutes or 90% because the sauce I'm using here, which is this one right here, a simple combination. Right? It's egg yolks and cheese, pecorino cheese, which they use in Rome. Okay? This is it. It's 4 egg yolks. Right? And 1/3 of a cup of pecorino romano cheese. And you just I'll just separate the eggs and the yolk. Right? And whip the yolks with the cheese. Looks like that. It's like sabaglione, right?
You have a question.
What's the question?
Amy wants to know, how do you measure your pasta for number of people?
That's a good question, Amy. I use a pound for 4 people. A 1/4 pound per person, might seem faint, but that's a perfect amount, especially if it's dressed nicely. So one box of pasta, or 1 pound of pasta for 4 people. This is 1 pound right here. This is a recipe for 4 people. Okay. You're one of them, Soph. She excited? No.
Oh!
Okay. And let this pasta cook while I read you the last section of the book. The last section of the book, right? You want to make sure you get it up and boiling, right? I've got my sauce right here again. My eggs and cheese. I'm going to take this when it's done, straight from this pot, right into this bowl, okay? And then it'll be done. And it'll cook in this. I have something else here, which is guanciale. Right? This is the jowl of a hog. I know, gross, but cheeks are delicious, people. Okay? If you don't eat meat, you just leave those out. Okay? I rendered them down earlier. I'm going to put them in this later. You'll see how I do so. But that's it. Simple, direct. I'll tell you how I got this recipe, right? The significance of it in a minute. Let me finish reading from the book. This is the last scene, the big last scene in the book itself, where Caesar returns. It happens in real time in the story. Yes, this. Where Caesar is has made dinner for all the customers at the Notch on the night before Easter. It's very much like a Big Night type scene, if you know that movie, Big Night. According to the captain, the night before Easter was a big deal at the Notch. The night when everyone, the old school crowd, the players, the young up-and-comers, and the regular folk from around the way, as he would say, stepped out to celebrate together. He had spoken for weeks about doing something different for the menu, and the captain eventually agreed to my plan for a 5-course pre-fee, 1 seating, semi-formal dress, reservations required. The menu was posted on the wall 2 weeks in advance, and within a day the books were full. The atmosphere was to be elegant, and for the food I had decided on Creole, a grand cuisine with African and European roots. Extra staff was hired, so I had help in the kitchen, peeling and cleaning the shrimp, chopping vegetables for mirepoix, and stirring flour and fat into a deep brown roux. The last course was left to me alone. I spent my prep time working the bones out of a half-dozen ducks. Downstairs, the captain helped Jackie pop corks on the special wine he had bought for the occasion. Cases of Prosecco rested on ice. The tables were moved together and set with 3 plates in each spot. Candles flickered. The waitstaff wore black pants and white dress shirts. The captain, a blue suit, a pork pie hat tilted back on his head. He greeted each guest as they walked through the door, while Jackie, in a form-fitting evening dress, fluttered around the room with a tray of champagne flutes. From the stereo, Ella and Louis sang a duet. After an opening hour of canapes and oysters and shrimp in remoulade sauce, everyone sat down for the main courses. Slaving over my ducks in the kitchen, I could hear the happy murmurs as people ate the seafood gumbo, which was stocked with shellfish, peppers, and spice. The murmurs turned to hollers when the next course, a rabbit and sausage etouffee, hit everyone's plate. The smell of deep flavor filled the air, along with the sound of joyous voices and clanging silverware and glasses. The staff was in constant motion, back and forth between the kitchen and the main room, the magic hum of a bustling restaurant. The next course involved a bit of theater. Covered platters were placed in front of each patron. Then, in concert, the servers dramatically removed the silver tops, revealing with a whoosh of steam a sea of shrimp and a light red sauce layered over a mound of white rice topped by a rose I'd carved from a whole tomato. This was my take on shrimp creole, a Bayou classic. Busy in the kitchen, basting the main course, I heard a roar of surprise, followed by applause and exclamations. The hum returned as I continued in the kitchen. With the bones I'd taken out of the ducks, I made a stock. From that stock, I made a reduction. From the reduction, I made a glaze. With that glaze, I shellacked the roasting ducks to a deep mahogany and stuffed each's hollow cavity with jambalaya, a thick rice dish with heavy seasoning and crumbled Cajun sausage. For the final step, I surgically cut each duck into 8 slices, held the body together, reglazed one last time, and put them all back in the oven for a minute to seal. When they were ready, the ducks were transferred to hot trays and carried down to the floor where they were placed on people's plates. Then each waitress, using the serving utensil, tapped the duck on top. And from the stairs, I watched as the whole body folded open into slices and the jambalaya poured out over the meat. Silence, followed by an ovation. I went back to the kitchen and smoked a cigarette by the vent. For dessert, I served warm pecan pie with French vanilla ice cream on the side. Once the meal was over, people crowded so deep in front of the bar that the nearby tables had to be cleared away. I removed my apron and went down to help Jackie tend bar. Behind the bar, I put some Zydeco on the stereo and started taking drink orders. Hats and jackets came off, shoes too. Hair dropped, mine included. The music, a mix of accordion, drums, guitar, and spoons on a washboard, grooved. The whole room followed along, leaping into motion. A petite woman with a streak of silver through her flowing dark hair stood watching the scene and clapping her hands. I walked out from behind the bar and led her by the wrist to the dance floor. The other dancers paused momentarily at the strange sight that urged us on. "Go on, boy," they yelled. "Go on now." With both hands, I led the woman away and back to one side, then the other, bouncing on one foot all the while, just like Carmen had taught me to Cajun jitterbug. People then filled in around us, but left enough room for us to maneuver. We did standard steps, back and forth, with the occasional spin tossed in. I bounced with the music, ignoring the pain in my side. The women's skirts swirled as I picked up the spins. Then for the grand finale, I pulled her alongside me, slipped my hand around the small of her back, and held her hip, flipping her into the air. She did a complete somersault and landed gracefully on her feet. She came right back to me, smiling as the astonished crowd cheered. When the song was over, I thanked her for her time for the dance. Then I went back to the bar and resumed my role as a server and an observer, happy to have been part of the mix, if only for a moment. Oh, that's good. And the pasta's almost done. So that scene there is sort of the penultimate one in the book. You think that, Caesar's already solved the mystery, things have been worked out. You get the sense that perhaps he's going to stay there. What happens On the next day, on Easter, he sort of goes to church in a way, and walks back over the Brooklyn Bridge and where he's heading home to New Jersey to buy that inn that was just portrayed in the previous scene, and begin the next section of the Caesar Style mystery series. I hope you enjoyed those. I mean, I really like this book. I felt, artistically when I was writing it that I was really in a great place, between sort of gritty noir and a sense of poetry through description. I love the character. I think, this guy Caesar Styles is such a unique sort of, American figure, sort of, fits into the mythology of the rambling American man, but someone with a lot more heart and soul. And I was just talking until the food was ready. Okay, so let's finish this up. Before I make this meal, let me, let's just take a minute. We'll be done in 2 minutes, I promise. And I'm hungry. Thank you all for coming. I know it's hard to turn these things on, and I have a hard time sort of following along too. And I know you're getting bombarded with offers to come here and Zoom this and Zoom that or whatever, and live stream, but I do really appreciate you coming. I find great solace in this. I hope that you do as well. I miss seeing all of you. I miss seeing people in general, and I know we'll be doing it again soon, but in the interim, I encourage you to do things like this and to support those of us who are doing it. We do so at our generosity, but also our desire to see each other, which is the most important part. I'm going to overcook the pasta with my rambling. So I have this, again, this is, one of these bowls, by the way, is just so important for cooking. I got this recipe from my friend, Rocco Spirito. Rocco and I were supposed to be at the 92nd Street Y this week. If you don't know him, he's one of the, first wave American celebrity chefs, a really great guy and a huge figure in American cuisine. Him and I was having an event last week on Tuesday at the 92nd Street Y. Obviously it was canceled, but I saw him making this on TV one day, and I was just like, this is perfect. This is this great meal that anyone can make at home with the stuff you probably already have in your fridge. It's eggs, it's cheese, it's guanciale you probably don't have, maybe pancetta, or even bacon. I know some of my Italian friends will be mad if I say use bacon, but you just have that pork thing. You render down the pork, right? You mix the eggs with the cheese. This is for 4 people, it's 4 eggs, 1 egg yolk, right? And a third of a cup of pecorino cheese. You cook your pasta to about almost done. You take it out. Now don't shake it off. You want that water, okay? Am I in there? Okay. You want the water, okay? Because you're gonna mix that water, gonna help make the sauce thick. Mix it around. You're gonna save a little of the water to mix in if it's still not thick enough. Or it's too thick. You're mixing it around. This sauce right now, the egg and the cheese is mixing with the pasta, creating this very creamy sauce. Okay? Trust me, it's super creamy. I'm gonna get some more. You don't gotta get every last strand, right? Don't kill yourself getting everything out of the bottom of the pot. This is a great way to transfer your noodle into the sauce. Now again, if you're making a more traditional dish where the sauce is hot, right? You want to put it in there like, you want to cook about 80% of the recommended time and have it finish in the sauce. What it does when it does that is it absorbs the sauce as like the cooking liquid, and therefore it has more taste. That's what makes restaurant pasta so much more tastier than home pasta. Right? This looks perfect. Let me show you. See how creamy that is and hot. Oh, it's beautiful. Now, I have my guanciale, of course. I have my guanciale. This is so creamy. I gotta show you again. It's nothing but egg yolk and cheese and pasta and the pasta water. That's why it's creamy. The pasta water. Am I gonna belabor that? Maybe. Okay. Now, people like to put the guanciale in now, right? But some people don't like the guanciale in the pasta. My son doesn't like the pieces of guanciale in his pasta. Yes, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart completely. But I understand. So what I have to do is plate for one. Okay? Make a little nest in the middle. Do a little nest right in the middle. And for those of us who are taking the guanciale, take about a tablespoon and you put it in the middle. So there's your little, and you can mix it around. Also, I rendered it down, right? I saved the render, the fat that came off it, and I just do a little drizzle of the fat around it. Not too much, right? You don't want to overdo the fat. And then, of course, I just ground this pepper a minute ago, okay? And put this fresh ground pepper on that, give a little cacio pepe feel to it, right? This is beautiful. A perfectly simple pasta dish that you could probably make with what you have in your fridge right now. And look how quickly I did it while I was reading, right? Also, was gilding the lily tonight a little bit and made this antipasto plate. And what we have here is prosciutto, fresh aged prosciutto from San Daniele, some coppa, right? And burrata. You ever burrata? It's like mozzarella, but like, you know, mozzarella knew somebody, right? It's spectacular cheese. And I have some prosciutto bread. All these are from ALC Alimentari in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And I highly recommend that you support your local stores through the purchase of their fine goods. All right, so I think we're hit it. How we doing?
Good.
Okay. Guys, thank you so very much. I'm glad to have seen you here tonight. I got myself, we're saying goodbye, all right? Kato, say peace. Have a great week. Stay in touch. You need to talk to me, you know where to find me, okay? Buonanotte.
Buonanotte.
That means good night.
Oh.